Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding Mishnah Berurah Chelik Gimel, and in Yirtz Hashem today we will be learning Daf Tzadik Amid Beis. We are continuing to learn Hilchos Shabbos. We pick up today on Tzadik Amid Beis, 4 lines down from the top in the Shulchan Aruch, Siman Shin Gimel Sif Gimel. Our learning should be a schus for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael Hanesunim Batzaru Bashivya Ha'imdim Bein Bayomu Bein Bayabasha Hamakim Yerachem Aleihem V'Yitziam Yitzara L'Rvacha Me'afelu La'ira Mishibah L'Geula Hashta B'Golo V'Zman Kariv and Amar Main. Our learning should be a schus for Shalema from Moshe Meir ben Esther Fradel, Yitzchak ben Sion ben Dusha, Tzvi ben Leah Miriam, Chava Hadassah bas Rezel Serel, Devara bas Shashabina, Rivka bas Shira Leah. They should have a refuah shalema b'seich shar chayil Yisrael. Our learning should also be a schus. The Rebbeinu Shalom should watch over all of our brothers and sisters who find themselves in a harm's way. B'chol makom shehem. So here in Siman Shin Gimel, we are continuing to learn the halachas that govern what a woman may go out wearing on Shabbos and what she may not go out wearing on Shabbos. As I said in the previous shir, there's kind of an elephant in the room when it comes to the shiurim that we've been having. The previous share, this share, it's going to continue on for a little bit, and that is there seems to be a little bit of a disconnect between what we're learning on the page and practically what we see people do. It's something that we're going to have to discuss. We haven't hit the point yet at which we're ready for that discussion. So in the meantime, we have to work our way through what we see on the page, and then we'll have to expand upon it and discuss it at a future point. So now let's go to Siv Gimel. Says the Mechaber, Lo yiseitze b'kippah shel tzemer. A woman cannot go out with a small, now the word kippah means a cap, right? Kippah. This kippah shel tzemer is almost more of a headband than it is a true cap, as we'll see in the words of the Ramah. But right now, Lo yiseitze b'kippah shel tzemer, you can't go out with this small woolen cap. And the Mechaber describes it in a little greater detail. Dahainu, chute de imra. This was a band or a cap that was fashioned out of chutim, strings of wool. Imra is wool. De gedelin, that were braided. Va'avidi kihutza, so that it was made kind of the way a wicker basket is made. That's what a hutza is. A hutza is a wicker basket. Pirish, the Ramah says here, Kikelim ha'asuyim me'ale lulvei hadikolim. It's like the baskets that are made out of palm fronds. Now, we're all familiar with these, really. It's the keshelah of a lulav. What's the keshelah of a lulav? It's woven out of the palm, the lulav. The lulav, right, is a palm branch. It's closed, right? Eventually they open up. You could rip those flat leaves off. The keshel of the lulav is woven out of those. So says the Ramah, you want to know how this kippah shel tzemer was made? They took woolen threads and they wove them together the way that these wicker baskets were made out of alei dekolim. Shehem ba'ariga. They're woven. Masha'en ken itztama. This is in contrast to the next item that the Mechaber is going to mention, which is an itztama. The itztama was ha'asuya kimin leved. This was made like a felt. So this wasn't woven, it was more of a flat cloth. It was made like a felt. K'de'isa b'Gemara Sham, like the Gemara in Shabbos on Nun Zayin Amid Beis details. Now, both of these items, right? So the Mechaber said a woman cannot go out with the kippah shel tzemer, so that's that woolen woven band, and not with the Mechaber actually didn't mention the itztama yet. The Ramah gave us a heads up on the itztama. Says the Mechaber, urechavim kishtei etzba'os kishir tzitz. The nature of this kippah shel tzemer was that it was small. It was the size of 2 etzba'os. This is weird. This is why I said at the beginning of Siv Gimel that this kippah is not really so much of a cap. It's more of a headband. And from the Gemara and from the Rashi's Pirish in the Gemara in Shabbos, what this seems to be, and I think women do this nowadays with different types of tichlach and hats, is they have a headband that they use to flatten down and cover up and pull up maybe any stray hairs that might come out of their head covering. So they have the band to hold the hair in, and then they put a cap, a hat, over it. So it sounds really like that's what this Kippur Shel Tzemer is, and also the Itztama that the Mechaber is about to mention. On both of these, I think, the Mechaber is saying, Urechavim kishtei etzpais. These were very small. They were only the size of 2 etzpais. Kishir tzitz, which was the size of the tzitz that the Kohen Gadol wore on his forehead. So you can't go out with the kippah, v'loi be'itztama, nor can you go out wearing this flat cloth headband that was called an itztama. The hainu matlis, this was a cloth. Shetoilen by chutin. Oh no, I take it back. The itztama is something else. The Gemara in Shabbos gives 2 different pshatim in what the itztama is. The first pshat, the itztama, is more similar to the Kippur Shel Tzemer. The second pshat, the Gemara in Shabbos, the itztama, is something totally different. The Mechaber is going like the second pshat, the Gemara in Shabbos, not like the first. So just for clarity's sake, let me review over here. The first halacha that the Mechaber said was that a woman cannot go out with this a small woolen cap or a small woolen headband, the nature of which this was something that was woven out of strings of wool. Now, says the Mechaber, v'loi be'itztama. A woman could also not go out wearing an itztama. What's an itztama? The itztama was something very interesting. Dahainu matlis, this was a cloth. It was made out of cloth. Shetoilen by chutin shel tzivainen. And it had strings hanging down in front of a woman's face. This was something that they would put on a kala. So they would have a cloth, and it would have colored strings hanging down. What was the point of it? This was something that the kala could use to chase away flies or gnats. So what was going on over here? Well, we're talking about a kala. Now imagine a kala nowadays by the Kabbalah's Panim, right? So you come into the Kabbalah's Panim, and the kala is sitting over there on that fancy white chair, and she's got all of her friends and all of her family coming over to wish her mazel tov and to give her their brachas, and she's sitting there for a long time, and she's kind of on display. Now, it would be very unseemly for the kala, she's a kala, right? So she's like a princess, she's like a queen. It would be very unseemly for the kala to be sitting over there going like this. Also, everybody's going to be wondering, who is she waving at? Is she waving at me? Is she waving at her? Who is she waving at? So instead of the kala sitting there going like this, waving flies away from her face, they took a cloth. The cloth went on her head or on her forehead. It had these colored strings hanging down, and if flies would come, she would flick her head. She would flick her head, and those strings would wave back and forth, and that's what would chase the flies away instead of her going like this. So according to the second pshat in the Gemara, and according to the way the Mechaber is learning, that's what the itztama is. So we have over here basically 2 halachas in Siv Gimel. The first one was that a woman cannot go out with this woven headband or this small woven cap. The second halach is that you can't go out with this itztama, which was some kind of a fly-chasing device. Let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah. It says the Mishnah Berurah is cut in Yud Aleph, Loi Seitze, Ayin Likamon, Bereish Sif Yud Ches. In Sif Yud Ches, the Mechaber is going to discuss when we say Loi Seitze, when we say that the woman cannot go out with these things, does this mean that she can't go out only to a real Rishus HaRabim? How about to a chotzer? A chotzer, technically speaking, is a Rishus HaYachid, but midrabanan, you're not allowed to carry in a chotzer unless you have an eruvei chatzeros. Is a woman allowed to go out to the chotzer wearing these things if there's no eruvei chatzeros? That's what we're going to discuss in Sif Yud Ches. That's what the Mishnah Berurah is making reference to over here. Ois cotton Yud Beis, Kishir Tzitz, the size of this Kippur Shel Tzemer, it was small, it was only 2 etzpais. Now, says the Mishnah Berurah, many of you might be wondering, why can't you go out with this headband? Why can't you go out with this cap? Well, says the Mishnah Berurah, who takshit. In reality, midaraisa, she could go out wearing this, because it's a takshit. If it's not a malbush, but it's definitely at least a takshit. So midaraisa, she could go out with it. So why can't she go out? oh, it's an Issa D'Rabbanan. What's the Issa D'Rabbanan? Because this was chashiv enough, and it was pretty enough, v'chayshinan dilma shalfa umechavia, that we had to worry that she might take it off and show it to somebody. So this is another Issa D'Rabbanan where we are concerned that a woman might take off something that she's wearing to show it to her friend. That's the Isser over here. Ois Katan Yud Gimel, the Itztama, the Mechaber said, was a matlis. It was a cloth, and it had those strings hanging down to chase away the flies. Well, says the Mishnah Berurah, Zeh eino loy tachshit v'loy malbush. This does not meet the bar of being either a malbush, you're not wearing it to conceal or protect the body. Chasing away the flies is not to protect the body. Chasing away the flies is to chase away an inconvenience. It's something that bothers you, the flies buzzing around your face. But it's not protection. It's not protecting the guf. So this is not considered a malbush. It's also not a takshit. It's be'ikr. It's not there to be an adornment. It's something that you're having over there to provide a function to chase away flies. And therefore, says the Mishnah Berurah, the heavy kemasa, this would actually be a masa, a burden. Now, from a simple reading of the Mishnah Berurah over here, you would come to the conclusion that the Mishnah Berurah is telling us that the matlis, the itztama, is actually an issa daraisa, right? Because if it's the kippa shel tzemer, that the Mishnah Berurah said, really, it's a takshit. So midaraisa, she could wear it. She can't wear it midarabanan because dilma shalfo machavio. We're afraid she'll take it off and show it to somebody. But on the itztama, the fly chaser, here the Mishnah Berurah is telling us, guess what? It's not even a takshit. It's not a malbish. It's not a takshit. Okay? If it's not a malbish and it's not a takshit, what is it? It's a masui. It's a burden. If it's a masui, it's an issa daraisa. Yet, the Mechaber didn't give us any indication of that. The Mechaber didn't say, if you go out with an itztama chayiv. He didn't say that. He seems to lump it together with the Kippur Shel Tzemer. So let's take a look here at the Shar HaTzion, Ois Katan Yud, where the Chavetz Chaim brings down a bach. Ayin bach shekosav duhu masa. He says, look, I wrote in the Mishnah Berurah, in Sif Yud Gimel, I wrote that it's a masa because I'm following the bach. So ayin bach shekosav duhu masa. When we come up, nevertheless, says the Chavetz Chaim, nirali delav masa gomeru. It seems to me that this is not a real bona fide masui that you would be over in issa daraisa if you wore it. Because the Mechaber lumps it together with the Kippur Shel Tzemer. And he continues, and near the end he says here, Val korchach delav masui gomeru. He he brings this down from the Bir Agra. He says it can't be a masui gomer. So this is a very interesting case. This is something that we see sometimes in the Chavetz Chaim. Even though the Chavetz Chaim wrote in the Mishnah Berurah that it's a masui, which would seem to indicate that it's an issa daraisa, in the Shar Tzion he explains that he did that because of a bach, but he's not machriya like that bach. As far as the hachra of the Mishnah Berurah, in the Shar Tzion, the Chavetz Chaim is being machriya that this is an issa d'Rabbanan, not an issa d'Oraisa. Just interesting to point that out. Okay, let's move along. Let's move along to Ois. We're in the middle of Ois Katan Yud Gimel in the Mishnah Berurah. So the Chavetz Chaim said, "V'zeh eino lo takshut v'lo malbush v'kamasa shetoilin oisay rak la'afriach." It's providing a function, but it's not the function of either a malbush or a takshut. Mipnei, what's the point of it? Mipnei shemiyamad lo zvuv al panea he mispayeshes lagarshai. This is because the kala, if a fly is going to land on her, she can't sit there going like this. It would be embarrassing. How's it going to look on the pictures? You can't do that. So that's why she had this device hanging on her. And now we come to Siv Dalid. Now, before we do Siv Dalid, Siv Hey, Siv Vav, and Siv Zayin, there's a short hakdama that we need. So what we understand already over here in Siman Shin Gimel is that very high level, there is an issa d'Rabbanan for a woman to go out with most types of tachshitim, most types of jewelry. What's the issa d'Rabbanan? We're afraid dilma sholfa umechavia. she might remove the item of jewelry to show it to somebody and then come to carry it Dalet Amos in Rishus Harabim. So that's a very high-level gzera. Jewelry is a no-no. A lot of takshitim are a no-no because Dilma Shalfa Machavia, a woman might come to take it off, show it to somebody, and carry it Dalet Amos in Rishus Harabim. Now, having said that, there are different types of women. Sometimes you have a woman who's an Isha Chashuva. An Isha Chashuva, right? A very dignified, classy woman. For an Isha Chashuva, there's a svara to say that the concern of Dilma Shalfa Umechavia does not apply. Why? Because it's not classy. For an Isha Chashuva to go ahead and take off a piece of jewelry and show it to her friend in the street, that's not classy. You know, it's like they say a very wealthy woman or a real princess could get away sometimes with wearing something that's fake, right? Because nobody would dream that it's fake. If she's wearing a big fat fake diamond, no one's going to look at it and say, look at her, she's wearing a fake diamond. No, it's real. If she's wearing that, it's real. While a more lower class woman, you know, you wear that, what is a piece of junk? So there's a difference in the station of a woman. So if you have a high class Isha Chashuva, for her to go in the street and take off something and show it to her friend, look what I got. For me, this is nothing. It's no big deal. I don't have to take it off and show it to you. It's also, it's unseemly. It's beneath her to go take off a piece of jewelry and show it to somebody in the street. So there would be a svara to say that the gzeira of Dilma Shalfa Umechavia, and then she might come to carry it down to Rishus Harabim, maybe it doesn't apply to an Isha Chashuva. There's such a svara. Having said that, the halacha is that any kind of typical jewelry, the typical type of jewelry that's worn by most women, even an Isha Chashuva is not allowed to wear it. Why? Because it's a loy plug. Once the Chachamim said that women can't go out with jewelry, they didn't say, well, it depends how chashuv you are. You have to give us your tax form. Let's see what bracket you fall into. It applies to you, but no, it doesn't apply to her. Once they made gzeira that you can't go out with jewelry, you can't go out with jewelry. But there's an exception to that. And that is, sometimes you have a piece of jewelry that is so chashuv, it's only worn by an Isha Chashuva. Now, if it's a type of jewelry that's only worn by an Isha Chashuva, so then the Chazal never made a takana on that. So again, jewelry that's worn by all types of women, so on that, the Chachamim made a gzeira, you're not allowed to go out with it on Shabbos, Dilma Shalfa Machavia. You might take it off, show it to somebody, come to carry it down Lamas of Rishus Harabim. Once they made the gzeira on that kind of jewelry, they applied it across the board. They applied it to regular women. They also applied it to an Isha Chashuva. But then, when you come to a piece of jewelry that's only worn by an Isha Chashuva, well then, the gzeira never applied to that type of jewelry. Because the only women who wear it are an Isha Chashuva. And an Isha Chashuva is not going to take it off the street and show it to a friend. So that would be a kind of piece of jewelry that an Isha Chashuva could wear in Rishus Harabim. But then there's another kind of piece of jewelry. Then there's a piece of jewelry that is so chashuv and so spectacular that even an Isha Chashuva would take it off and show it to somebody. So it comes out that there's kind of, if you want to look at it this way, there's kind of four madregas, or four steps, if you will, over here. First, there's the very high-level gzeira. The very high-level gzeira is, you can't go out with jewelry. A woman can't go out with jewelry on Shabbos. A gzeira, Dilma, Shalfa, Umechavia, and then she'll come to carry it 4 Amos in Rishus Harabim. When it comes to standard jewelry that's worn kind of across levels, that applies to everybody. It applies to regular women. It applies to an Isha Chashuva, even though maybe it shouldn't apply to an Isha Chashuva, but there's a loy plug. Once we have that gzeira applies to everybody. Then there's a type of a piece of jewelry that only an Isha Chashuva wears. Since only an Isha Chashuva wears it, so now the gzeira was never made on that jewelry. and on that woman. So over there, the Isha Chashuva could wear it. It's not a problem. But then there's a piece of jewelry that's so chashuv that even an Isha Chashuva might go ahead and take it off and show it to somebody. So even an Isha Chashuva can't go out with it. Okay, that's kind of the rules. Now we're going to see in these Se'ifim of Shulchan Aruch, we're going to see how these rules manifest themselves. So let's go to Siv Dal. It says the Mechaber, Loi Seitzei Be'ir Shel Zahav. Loi Seitzei Be'ir Shel Zahav. A woman cannot go out with this type of jewelry that was called an Ir Shel Zahav, literally a golden city. Upirish Rashi describes this, he explains it. Shu takshit ogoil, this was a round takshit, umitzayin boy kimin ir, and it had the form of a city, Yerushalayim, embossed on it. V'yesh be'emtza, and in the middle of this round piece somewhere, there was a lashon, a tongue, shemechaber ma'isay lamalbush, that you used to attach it to your clothing. For Rabbeinu Tam pirishu kein atar l'roish, Rabbeinu Tam had a different description of this Ir Shel Zahav. He said that it was like a tiara, something that was worn on the forehead that had embossed on it an image of Yerushalayim, an image of the skyline of a city. Okay, so what's the halacha that we have over here? The Mechaber says a woman cannot go out with an Ir Shel Zahav. A woman cannot go out with this type of jewelry, Ir Shel Zahav. He gives us two descriptions of it. One is, according to Rashi, this is a round piece that has the image of the skyline on it, and it has some kind of a metal tongue affixed to it, which you would use like a brooch, kind of, to attach to your clothing. Rabbeinu Tam had a different pirush of what this Ir Shel Zahav is. He said it was a tiara that was worn on the forehead. Either way, says the Mechaber, you cannot go out wearing this. Let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cutting your dalit. Takshit ogoil. This was something that was round. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Va'av she'ein derech leilech ba ela isha chashuva. Oh, this Ir Shel Zahav was something that was only worn by an isha chashuva. So this is not typical jewelry that all women wore. This is something that only an Isha Chashuva wore. But, b'kamokim, nevertheless, chayshinan gamba dilma asya la'achvuye. Over here, the gzeira of dilma sholfo machavia even applies to an Isha Chashuva. Why? Shechashiv tvei miklila dilakaman. Because this is even more chashuv than the kalila that we're going to learn about soon. So this Siv Dalid in the Mechaber over here is an example of the piece of jewelry that is so chashuv that we're afraid even in Isha Chashuva, who normally we don't have to be afraid Dilma Shalfa Machavia. But this Ir Shel Zahav is a very chashuv a piece of jewelry. And since the Ir Shel Zahav is a very chashuv a piece of jewelry, even an Isha Chashuva cannot go out with it to Rishus HaRabim, because even by her, we're afraid Dilma Shalfa Umechavia. Aiskat Tezvav, Shemechaber Maisai, according to Rashi's understanding of the Ir Shel Zahav, it had a tongue on it that you used to attach it to your garment. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Einoi Chibur Gomer. This tongue of metal that you used to affix the Ir Shel Zahav to your garment, it did not affix it firmly to the garment. V'yechaylin l'shalfa, and she could still remove it. And that's why we're afraid Dilma Shalfa Machavia. V'kevin shu takshit, chayshidin Dilma Shalfa Machavia. V'zatam hu gam l'pirish Rabbeinu Tam. This is the explanation of why you can't go out with the Ir Shel Zahav, even according to the Rabbeinu Tam. According to the Rabbeinu Tam, that it was a tiara. Again, it's a very chashuva a tiara. And therefore, even an Isha Chashuva might take it off and show it to somebody in the street. Okay, so that was Siv Dalet. Now let's go to Siv Hey. Kalila. Now we have another kind of piece of jewelry called a kalila. What's a kalila? V'hu takshit shamanichasai al padachta. This is something that was worn on the forehead. Me oizen la oizen, it went across from ear to ear. V'kaishrasai b'ritzuais hatluyos, and it was tied onto the head with straps. Muteres latzeis boy, this is something that you're allowed to go out with. And this is true, bein shehi asuya mechitoichai shalzav charuzois b'chut, whether this kalila was fashioned out of kind of links or pieces of gold that are strung on a thread, bein she'oisan chatichais kevuais b'matlis, or it was formed by pieces of gold that were stitched onto a cloth. Okay, so we have this kalila. This kalila, again, sounds like some kind of a tiara. It's something that was worn across the forehead. The Mechaber tells us there were two different types. There was one type where you had pieces of gold that were affixed or stitched somehow onto a cloth. It sounds almost like a man's silver HaTorah on a talus, where you have the squares of silver that are sewn and stitched down to a cloth. Or there were pieces of gold that were strung onto strings, and that's how they made the kalila. Either way, the Mechaber says a kalila muteris lotzis by. A kalila you're allowed to go out with. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Cotton Tezayin, Bein Shehi Asuya, this you're allowed to go out with. Hatam, what's the reason for this halacha? What's the explanation of Sifhei? Deman darka l'meipak bazeh, who goes out wearing a kalila? Isha Chashuva. Only an Isha Chashuva wears a kalila. V'hi lo shalfo machavya. This is the type of jewelry that only an Isha Chashuva goes out with, but it's not like the Ir Shel Zov. The Ir Shel Zov, that's such a spectacular piece that even an Isha Chashuva will take it off and show it to somebody. The Kalila is not. The Kalila is an Isha Chashuva type of jewelry, but it's the type that it doesn't pass that she should take it off to show it to somebody. And therefore, there's no gzera. Because the Paiskim write, the Bashar Takshishim Shekala Nasha Regilis Ben, but other types of standard jewelry that all women wear, Af Chashuva Asura Lotzis Ben, even an Isha Chashuva can't go out to Loi Polig Rabbana B'Tekanosam, because like I told you, the Chachamim made a Loi Plug. They said that regular jewelry, regular women can't go out with it, and an Isha Chashuva also can't go out with it, because there's a Loi Plug. So between Sif Dalid and Sif Hey and the Mishnah Berurah, so far we've seen really all of the rules that I told you about. Regular jewelry, no women could go out with, not even an Isha Chashuva, because like the Mishnah Berurah just said, the Kasar Paiskin, the Bashar Takshitim, regular jewelry, Shekala Nasher Rekilis Ben, that all women wear, Av Chashuva, Suralotzis Ben. Even an Isha Chashuva can't go out with it. Even though she's not going to take it off and show it to somebody. Doesn't matter. Why? So that's regular jewelry. Then we have jewelry that only an Isha Chashuva wears. That's a klila. That's sifhei. A klila is a piece of jewelry that a regular woman wouldn't wear. Only an Isha Chashuva would wear it. And an Isha Chashuva wouldn't take off a klila in the street and show it to somebody. So therefore there's no gzeira on a klila. So a woman could go out, an Isha Chashuva could go out wearing a klila. There's no shash, dilma, shalfa, or mechavia. Then we come to the Ir Shel Zov. The Ir Shel Zov is a spectacular piece. That's the piece that even an Isha Chashuva cannot go out with. Because even by an Isha Chashuva, when it comes to something like an Ir Shel Zov, we have to be afraid, dilma, shalfa, or mechavia. Moving along to Sivav. Resukya. What is a resukya? So a resukya sounds like a kind of cape, a wrap of some kind. Dainu chatichas mi'il rechava. It's like a wide coat. Im yesh ba ritzuais kitzarais tluyais ba. If it has short straps affixed to it, likoishron bahem, that you use to tie it closed, or lahadkon svivaiseha, and to tighten it around herself, demihadek, so that it's tight, shari, then you're allowed to go out wearing it. Vim ein loy ritzuais, but it doesn't have closing straps, also, then you're not allowed to wear it. Explains the Mishnah Berurah, this is very simple. This kind of cape garment, if it doesn't have straps that allow a woman to tie it onto herself, so then this is a garment that we have to be afraid is going to fall off. It falls off very easily. And then she might come to carry it. So that's the story with the Resukya. Siv Zayin. Now we're going to revisit the question of a choker that we spoke about earlier. But the choker that we're going to discuss over here, if you remember back then, we spoke about two different types of chokers. One type of choker was the very tight one that was made to make the double chin. That one we said a woman's not allowed to go out with. Why? Because since it's very tight, it's a type of item that she would have to take off if she has to go to the mikveh. So then we're afraid she's going to take it off, she's going to go be toivel, and then she's going to carry it home. She's going to walk down Amos and Rishus Harabim. That was one kind of katla. Now we're going to talk about the katla that we described back then, which was a loose katla that had very wide straps. And this was something that was decorative, that she wore like on her collar area, and it had gold on it. It was something that was pretty. There would be no concern by that katla that she would have to take it off before she's toivel, because that wasn't tight. This was something that wasn't worn so tight. It was more just of an adornment. But this she's not going to be allowed to wear because Dilma Shalfa B'chavya, because she might take it off to show it to her friend. So says the Mechaber, lo yiseitze b'katla, she can't go out with the katla. The Mechaber describes this katla. Dainu beged sheyesh lo shinsim kein michdasayim. This was a beged that had loops. Shinsim are loops. Kein michdasayim, like the belt loops on pants. Umachnisa by ritzua rechava, a wide strap would go through the loops. The koishra saviv tzavara, and she would tie it around her neck. V'habeget toli aliba, and then this bib or dicky would be hanging down on her front. V'hu chashuv, and it was a chashuv, a beged, u'metzuyar bizav, and it was decorated with gold. Says the Mishnah Berurah cut yudches bekatla mishum dilma shalfa u'mechavya. The reason she can't go out with this is lest she take it off to show it to somebody and then come carry it. V'ayin le'el b'mashe kasavdu b'siv kat ches. Look earlier in Mishnah Berurah, is Kat Ches, where the Mishnah Berurah discussed the two different types of katlas. There's one katla that a woman's not allowed to wear because she has to take it off before she goes to the mikveh. And then there's this katla that a woman can't wear because Dilma Shalfa Umechavya. Excuse me. Moving along to Sif Ches, says the Mechaber. Lo yiseitze b'nizmei ha'af. A woman cannot go out with a nose ring. Aval yoytza b'nizmei ha'oizen. But she can go out with earrings. Says the Ramah Haggah. Why could she go out with earrings? Mipnei she'azneha mechusais. Because there are two different ways to wear a techel, or to wear a snood, or some kind of head covering. There were those that were makbid, that the head covering covered their ears. Now, if the head covering covers the ears, then we don't really have to worry Dilma Shalfa Umechavya, that the woman might come to take off her earrings to show them to somebody. You know why? Because they're under her head covering. Then there were those who wore the head covering above the ears. In that case, it's easy to take off the earrings. So says the Ramah, when the Mechaber says that a woman's allowed to go out with earrings, the reason is because she covers her ears with her head covering. But where the minig is that they wear the head covering above the ears, then also then they're not allowed to go out with earrings either. If that's the derech, is to have it sticking out from under the head covering. Says the Mishnah Berurah, cut your test, but you can't go out with a nose ring, the af the takshiru, again, even though it's a piece of jewelry. Dilma Shalfa Umechavya. She might show it to somebody. Could go out with earrings, because it's too much of a tercha to take them off. Because her ears are covered with her head covering. Moving along to Siftes. Another topic that we already really discussed. A woman cannot go out with a sewing needle, a needle with an eye. If a woman does go out with a needle with an eye, chayeves, it's an issa daraisa. If it's a needle without an eye, if she's using it to fasten her head covering, muteris lotzes boy. Then she's allowed to go out with it because she's using it as part of the malbush. She's using it to close up her head covering. But if she's not using it to close up her head covering, usher, then it would be usher for her to go out with it. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Lo yiseitze. You're not allowed to go out with this needle with an eye. Hainu afilu kishi techuva bebigda. The Mechaber is telling you a woman cannot go out with a needle with an eye, even if she sticks it into her clothing. So she's not carrying it in her hand. That certainly you can't do. What we're saying is she's sticking it into her beged. She still cannot go out with the needle with an eye. And if she does, it would be an issa daraisa. Why? Explains the Mishnah Berurah, the derech ha'itzahi be'isha l'kulei alma. Because now, let's analyze this. What is this needle? It's not a malbush, right? It's not an article of clothing. It's not a takshit. It's a sewing needle, right? So it's not a malbush. It's not a takshit. So what is it? It's a masui. And she's transporting it in the normal fashion. This is being moitziat kederech hamoitzian. This is the way that women transported sewing needles, by sticking it in their beged. So this is a recipe for disaster. This is mamish daraisa. Olinian ish. Now, how about if a man does this? Well, that we discussed earlier. Would it be an issa darabanan for a man? Because we say that for a man, it's not being moitziat kederech kalamitzian. A man doesn't want to be seen with a sewing needle because then they're going to call him a tailor, which wasn't such an honorable profession, I guess. Or some say no, even for a man, it's being moitzi kederech hameitzian. So there's a question whether for a man is this an issa darabanan or an issa daraisa. Ois katan chav beis chayeves. This would be a bona fide daraisa. They have a masui because the needle is a masui. Va'afilu ma'amedis by kishurev v'techeves hamachat batzoif. Even if she's using the needle to close up her head covering, or she sticks it in her veil, or she uses it to close her garment, because you don't do this with a sewing needle. And therefore it's classified as a masui. So to be clear, even if she's using this sewing needle, and in other words, if you take a look at the Mechaber discussed a needle with an eye and a needle without an eye. When the Mechaber discussed a needle without an eye, he said, well, it depends what she's doing with it. If she's closing up her garment, then it could be mutter. If she's not using it to close up her garment, it's usser. But by a needle with an eye, the Mechaber doesn't make any difference. The Mechaber doesn't say needle with an eye. If she just sticks it in her garment, it's an issa daraisa. If she's using it to close her garment, it's a different din. No, the Mechaber says the din is it's an issa daraisa whether she's using it to close up her garment or not. So the Mishnah Berurah is explaining that. The Mishnah Berurah says that by the needle that has an eye, even if she's using this needle to fasten her head covering, or she's using it to hang a veil, or she's using it to close her jacket, her cloak, it's still an issa daraisa. Why? Because you don't do that with a needle with an eye. Even though you're using it as a part of your garment, we're not going to look at it as a malbush, because what you're doing is not normal. Therefore it's a masui. And since you are attaching it to your garment, that is the derech, that is being moitzi an eye, a needle with an eye, kederech kalamitzi, and attached to your garment. And therefore it's a daraisa. But when it comes to a needle without an eye, so then the Mechaber said it depends. If she's using it to close up kishureha, what are kishureha? Dainu kishurei tzi'ifa, the ends of her turban, the ends of her head covering. Or she's using it to close up her top. The kiyotza bazeh, she's using it in any like fashion, then ois kan chavdalid, then mutter. Then the first opinion says over here, there aren't two opinions. There are going to be two opinions in the Mishnah Berurah. Then the Mechaber said it's mutter. But, says the Mishnah Berurah, yesh ma'achreinim shekasvu, there are achreinim that write, the dafka kishamakat einoi osoi lihiskashet boy. This that we're saying, that if you have a needle without an eye, and you use it in a functional manner, you use it to fasten the head covering or to close up a top, it's mutter. There are achronim that write that that's only true if it's a needle that is not made into like a piece of jewelry. If it's eina also lehiskashet boy, if it's not made as an adornment. If it's a regular needle without an eye, so okay, you're using it as a clasp. You're using it as a clasp, it becomes bottled to the malbush, and therefore it gets a din of a malbush, and it's mutter to go out with it. But if it's a fancy needle, if it's a needle that's made to be an adornment, now you have a problem. Let's say it has a fancy head, the needle, and now it's a tachshit. Then then you're not allowed to even use it in a functional way to fasten a head covering or to close a top. Why? Because now that you turned it into a piece of jewelry, now the gzeira against jewelry is going to kick in. But the Esharmim, there are those that say the B'chalgavni Shari, since you're using it in a functional fashion, it's mutter, and the gzeira d'Rabbanan against jewelry will not kick in. Why? The Kevin the Litznius Avida, if she's using it to close up, to fasten her head covering, or to close up her top, she needs it for tznius purposes. So lo yishal for b'chavya. She won't take it off to show it to somebody. Shelo yizgal sa'ara v'liba, so that she shouldn't uncover her hair or uncover her top. V'chein mitzadi dagra b'biyurai, and that's the position taken by the gra. The ikar tama heter b'ma'amedis kishareh mishum d'litznius avida, that the heter of using it as a clasp is because it takes away the gzeir of dilma shalfa b'chavya. And therefore you should not object to those who are mekel. Certainly our straight pins, shekar shpilka, even though one end is a little thick, it's not meant to be a tachshit, because we would not say that the gzeir of dilma shalfa or machavya kicks in. I think we're going to stop over here and we're going to save Sif Chav Hey for next time, but just to give a quick sequum of what we've seen over here at Sif Tes. So the Mechaber was talking about two types of needles. There's a needle with an eye, there's a needle without an eye. When it comes to a needle with an eye, for a woman to go out with a needle with an eye stuck in her clothing would be an Isser Daraisa. The Mechaber did not differentiate between how you're using that needle with an eye. And the Mishnah Berurah explains it would be an Issa Daraisa even if you're using the needle with an eye in a functional way. Even if she's using it to close up her top, she still cannot go out with the needle with an eye. It would still be an Issa Daraisa. Why? Because it's not the derech to use a needle with an eye in that fashion. And therefore the needle with an eye does not become bottle to her beged. We still look at it as a masui. And she's being moitziat kederach kol hamitziin, because that is a way that women transport needles with eyes attached to their clothing. So that would be an Issa Daraisa. When it comes to a needle without an eye, a straight pin, over there, the Mechaber said it depends. If she's using it in a functional way, if she's using it to fasten her head covering, or she's using it to fasten on her veil, or she's using it as a clasp to close up her top, then the Mechaber said it would be mutter. If she's not using it in a functional way, then the Mechaber said it's aser. Came along the Mishnah Berurah said, when the Mechaber says that if you're using it in a functional way, it's mutter, which means even mutter midrabanan, right? Said the Mishnah Berurah, the Achrayim say, wait a second, it depends on this straight pin. There's a regular straight pin, yes. Then, if you're using it in a functional manner, it will be mutter. But then there's a decorative straight pin. If you have a straight pin with no eye, but it has a decorative head, now it might rise to the level of jewelry. If it rises to the level of jewelry, then even if she's using it to fasten something, you have the gzeira of dilma shalfa umechavya. We have to worry she might take it off to show it to somebody. And then the Isser of jewelry, the Isser D'Rabbanan against jewelry kicks in. But then he said there are other Achrayim that say no. The Gzeira against jewelry cannot kick in, because how could you sell Dilma Shol from a Chavya? In order to take it off, she would risk her tznius, because she's using it as a clasp. She's using it to fasten her head covering. So it wouldn't pass to say Dilma Sholfa or Mechavia. That's what we're up to. We'll continue with Mishnah Berurah is Chafei in the next year. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. This of limud HaTorah should be Megan against Klal Yisrael. The Rosh Hashanah should send Yeshua, Sefurus, Parnasa, Sheduchim to all those in need. We should be zoichet to see the Biyaskal Tzedek. B'mher v'yameinu. Amen. Be well.